It's the Church of Jesus Christ.
What's the most common misconception in your view of the role of Christians in politics?
You know, the thing I run into all the time in DC is something you and I have discussed, and that is this perfectionism. The idea that if a candidate or a platform or a policy isn't perfect, we can't get behind it. But as I've said before, I joke that, basically we're making decisions between hold your nose and hold your nose tighter. So we have to relax a little bit and realize that politics, that government, it's a battle of inches. You're not going to have the perfect candidate. You're not going to have the perfect platform. Let me give an extreme example. If there were an election in my community only between a Marxist who is pro-life and a Marxist who is pro-abortion, I'd vote for the Marxist who is pro-life. Am I a Marxist? No. And people might go around saying Mansfield voted for a Marxist. But the fact is, I'm going to vote for the best I can get and then keep working for change. There's another thing I know too, and I've seen it in history. Scripture says that God guides the heart of the king like a watercourse. And I can't tell you how many times somebody gets elected on a certain platform, and once they get in office, God guides, things change, people give counsel, people whisper into that person's ear, and it's actually better than we thought it was going to be when the guy was running or the woman was running for the office. So Christians need to relax a little bit. They need to trust their sovereign God. They need to do the best that they can do in terms of platforms and policies and what candidates they support, and then trust that things are going to go right. The biggest concern or misunderstanding that I see Christians having is that they assume if it's not ideal, it shouldn't be ours. But nothing in DC is ideal, from the metro system to the policies. So you've got to relax and you've got to do the best you can do, and you've got to trust God to bring the victory in time.
Let's talk a little bit about the founders' vision for free speech, for the free exercise of religion in the public square. Why was that so important to the founders, and why is that really foundational to our constitutional republic?
Well, we got to remember that our founders had broken off from an England that restricted speech in print, from a pulpit, in political discourse. They would actually punish someone, put people in prison for things they said. And our founders wanted us to be able to say anything that we wanted to say, speak freely, speak openly, do religious speech, as they called it. And that's one of our sacred Bill of Rights, liberties in this country. So my concern is that that's going away, and Americans don't realize it. They don't realize that when a court restricts speech or challenges a pastor or something of that nature, this is a blow to free speech.
In the 21st century, particularly in 2024, trust in government and trust in politicians is at an extreme low. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of trust, particularly as you get with a younger generation. And then there's not a lot of trust even inside the church.
Right.
As we come up to the election season, you're going to even maybe hear some Christians, maybe even some pastors say, you have the option not to vote, and you're well in your right to not vote, and you shouldn't vote. What would be your message to pastors, ministry leaders, and just Christian lay people that are thinking about opting out of this upcoming election, not exercising their right to cast their vote, and not participate in the political process?
You know, I hear that a lot. I'm in DC, I hear it a lot. And I got to tell you that if we applied that same standard to Christianity, we'd call it perfectionism. We'd say, somebody said, I'm not good enough for Jesus to love me. We would say, oh, you don't understand grace. You don't understand mercy. That's a kind of perfectionism. You're not perfect enough. But that's exactly what we do with politics. Every so often, our government turns to us and asks, how would you like the government to be run? And everyone in the country has an obligation to answer. Christians especially, we're here to impact nations. We're here to spread truth. So a lot of the problem that some Christians have has to do with the fact that they can't find the perfect. There's not the perfect platform, the perfect candidate. It's too unholy for me, is basically what they're saying. And I go around sort of humorously saying, look, politics is a choice between hold your nose and hold your nose tighter. You just have to choose between less than ideal. We aren't making decisions between Jesus and the devil here. And so you're going to have to relax. You're going to have to choose the best you can. You're going to have to realize these are imperfect systems, imperfect governments, and do the most good that you can do. But to not do any good, I think, borders on sinful and is certainly unwise in our critical times.
How about the Christian that says, why all this talk about politics? Isn't there a separation of church and state? Why, I don't know if Christians should be, voting's one thing, but Christians shouldn't be talking about politics, certainly shouldn't be talked about from the pulpit or in the church. Shouldn't Christians just steer clear from politics altogether? What's your call to action for Christians getting engaged in the political process? And you're a historian. Give us a little maybe historical precedent of the church being engaged in the political process for the good of all people.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the worst things that can happen is for Christian people to withdraw themselves from the political realm. First of all, even separation of church and state does not mean remove faith from the public sphere. It just means the church shouldn't be running the state shouldn't be running the church. So people often quote that as though it's a justification for non-involvement. But I'll tell you, when we've had times in the past where the church withdrew or let the state dominate the church, that produced Nazi Germany. I lived in Germany for years, and they're still dealing with the fallout from that. Unbelievable damage. Other places in the world where the church went silent, where the church went what you and I would call pietistic and withdrew into the four walls of the church but didn't have an impact in the society. And I believe we're called to be salt and light. I believe the Great Commission is a commission to disciple the nations, which means that we're involved in all the spheres of a nation, education and military and government. And we've got to be expressing the truth. We've got to understand the system, and we've got to be active in it. It's part of the way we love people. It's part of the way we present Jesus in a society. And by the way, it's part of the way we share God's wisdom and his higher and better ways for our political systems. Otherwise, we leave it to the lowest common denominator. So I understand the weariness. Again, I live in D.C. I understand the disgust with the compromise and the corruption. I understand. You're not dealing with a perfect system, but we do the best we can to the glory of God. That's what Christians have to do.
Coral Ridge Ministries, founded by D. James Kennedy, is celebrating 50 years. 50 years with this amazing legacy of taking the gospel to the nation and teaching people how that gospel applies to every area of life. How does the gospel not only save sinners, but how does it shape culture and society? Why is Coral Ridge Ministries so important for this nation? Talk a little bit about the legacy of D. James Kennedy, and why is it so important that we continue this ministry for generations to come?
Well, Rob, as you know, you're asking the right guy, because I was deeply impacted by D. James Kennedy, his teaching about history, his teaching about our nation, his biblical theology, and bringing scriptural truth to our national life. And I would have to say that he's the main mentor in my life. So everything that I do, I think about his teaching or a booklet or something he said or a perspective on Lincoln or Washington or what have you every single day. And so I don't want to say necessarily we want more Stephen Mansfields in the world, but I do want to say we want more people who are ignited with a vision for our life, for our national life, ignited with solid biblical theology, connected to God, walking out the gospel, and making the difference they can make in the world. There are very few people like D. James Kennedy and now what you are doing, who both proclaim the gospel and build a strong church, but then out of that speak to our national life, speak to the leadership of nations, speak powerfully to them. That's what you're doing, that's what we're doing, and I think we can turn the nation if we keep doing it powerfully.